Pathways to Success. My name is Karen Welsh with Functional Pathways. I'm the VP of Clinical and Reimbursement Excellence, and I am joined today by the fabulous Carol Vance, founder and CEO of Alinea, who is going to chat with us today about all things, managed care, prior authorizations, how to streamline and make things more efficient for our therapy teams. So, and many, many other things that she will expound upon. And I'm hoping to ask some questions that maybe causes her a little pause and challenge. We'll see.
Okay.
Carol, welcome to Pathways to Success.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation, Karen.
Absolutely. So tell us about Alinea.
Sure. So what is Alinea? We are a healthcare technology company, software as a service, a SaaS company. And you know what? I'm going to start with our overarching mission because we're so mission driven. Our mission is to optimize care and connection for senior adults and their families, wherever they call home. Assisted living, independent living, memory care, private homes, long-term care communities. We accomplish this mission, and I'm sure you know how, by partnering closely with the rehab providers that directly serve these seniors and their families. We help them deliver profitable, productive, patient-centric care in these instances. And why rehab? Why are we accomplishing this mission via rehab? Because personally and professionally, I so deeply believe that rehab is what makes the difference between a senior adult just being alive and truly living. So it is a privilege to partner so closely and make a difference in the lives of those we serve and those they serve.
Where does that passion come from, Carol?
Oh, where does that passion come from? My first career was corporate finance. Started with PricewaterhouseCoopers and then was head of technology for both early stage and multinational tech companies, never knowing that I'd be on this side of the fence. Then I went back to school when my kids were little, and I wanted to pursue a career with what I felt was more meaning, purpose, more passion in that. And I started my graduate work in the psychology of health behavior change, focusing on prevention and management of chronic conditions, as well as successful aging. And my first job was with the Medical College of Wisconsin in the Division of Gerontology, working on a series of progressively funded National Institute of Health grants that were looking at how do we leverage technology? And I'm going to age myself. This was 20 years ago. So using technology to support seniors with mismanaged diabetes and other comorbid conditions. So these were complex cases. And we were using super rudimentary technology, yet our results were off the charts. So I'm working in this ivory tower of endocrinologists, gerontologists, rheumatologists, cardiologists, and rehab teams. Yet I'm also, as a research assistant, that's where I started, in the homes of all of these patients and their families and getting to know them. So I see this gap, right? Seeing that gap from those multiple perspectives was honestly the genesis of Alinea. That's also where I fall in love with working with senior adults. That's where I saw the power of technology to make a difference. And that's where I saw the power of rehab as part of all these larger teams, the power of rehab to not only make a difference in the life of an individual, but make a difference in overall outcomes, because we were looking at very ambitious goals with NIH. A difference in overall outcomes and a difference in healthcare costs. So that was the genesis of Alinea. It's gone through several renditions, and finally I just launched my own company to do it the best way I thought possible.
Well, welcome to the Senior Population Club. It's been my passion my whole entire life. I started out when I was 15 as a CNA in a little privately owned nursing home, and I knew then it was my calling and my passion. So welcome to that club. It's definitely an honor and a privilege every day to be able to work in this population, and I can see your enthusiasm around that and appreciate that as well, and see it especially with functional pathways, because we have that partnership. But I think it's not something that is natural out there. Maybe that's not the right word. I think people miss that piece, that connection, and that the seniors are the reason that we're here, right? Without
Right.
them, we're not here. So we've got to make sure that we are paying attention to that care. So I'm curious from you said at the very beginning about Alinea and what that does. You talked about productivity and efficiency. What does that look like from your platform? What does that mean for the therapists and all of those environments that you talked about?
Sure, break that down a little bit. So I'm going to simplify it because we do a lot. So we are going to streamline and automate workflows for the field. So all the clinicians, the assistants, and the staff that work in the field. We are going to allow therapists to operate at the top of their license. We are going to give them more time back, and we're going to allow them to have a greater punch with that time that they have. Okay, what we're also going to do is centralize, route, prioritize revenue cycle and administrative tasks to more specialized and obviously centralized teams. So this allows those teams to do more with less. It brings patients onto caseload faster, and as your front line drives your bottom line, sets the stage for reimbursement too. Okay, so we're working in the field, we're working with centralized teams. So obviously, what are we going to do? We're going to streamline the communication between both of those. We make it very simple. So instead of leaving Alinea, all of the communication stays within Alinea. We're tracking the history, or we're tracking turnaround times. It stays within the patient record. And with a sophisticated process of notifications, you know whose court the ball is in, what next steps to take. Complex cross-functional team workflows go smoothly. It works. Okay, at the same time, what are we doing? We are engaging patients, their responsible parties, and their authorized family members. We're doing this via, yes, a powerful patient portal, but we all know patient portals, people have spent a lot of money on, made the decision to buy, and then they sit there unused, right? And so we pair that with automated, effective communication strategies. So it's the opposite of a once and done DocuSign that you go out and you never do. It is the outreach to bring the people in to effectively start building this relationship, getting the job done, but building that trust and confidence. Okay. So then what we're going to do over this whole system that we built, we're going to give those who have the power to take action in the field prompts and insight, while we're giving leadership oversight over their whole organization, depending on their level of authorization and what they're wanting to look at, so that they are able to define best practices, scale best practices, refine those over time as things change, ensure compliance, make sure everything is working smoothly. So you're tracking your productivity, you're tracking the efficacy, you're ensuring the system works well. We sit side by side with the EMR, coordinate with the EMRs, and it just lets everybody do the job that they're focused on doing.
Well, that interoperability is so important. And as many apps and platforms, and I mean, at Functional Pathways, we probably have, I don't know, 15 or 16 different platforms that operate different things. And it's a lot to coordinate all that. But certainly from a prior authorization perspective, we know that's a big hot button in the industry right now. We know that that's the roadblock sometimes for providers, therapists, physicians, whoever it is. Prior authorizations are an issue. Where do you see CMS going? I know I've seen a lot in McKnight's and Skilled Nursing News and all of the publications out there about the scrutiny that's coming from CMS to the managed A plans or managed care plans around that prior authorization process. Where do you see that going? And do you see that as necessity? based on all the things that you just talked about around that accessibility?
That is a big question. I I don't presume to have all the answers to that, and we certainly see a buzz in Washington for legislation. We see call outs to standardize the electronic submission of these prior authorizations. And while I think the attention to this and the desire for this is certainly moving us in the right direction, we all know that that is not going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
So do we stay frustrated and wait until all that has happened, or do we do what we can do now to ensure that the burden of these prior authorization processes, the increasing complexity and prevalence of Medicare Advantage plans, the increase in denials that we're seeing, do we attack this problem now? Do we solve this problem now? Or do we wait for something in the future? Well, you know what I'm going to say. We solve this problem now while keeping our eye on what's coming and being able to adjust and give the most to our clients regarding that.
What do you see as the biggest challenge when it comes to pre-authorizations? What do you see as most often why a prior auth takes so long, or why something might be denied? And we know there's thousands of different managed care plans out there. Even if you're under just one, the umbrella of Humana or Anthem or Blue Cross Blue Shield, whatever it might be. But then there are multiple different rules underneath that. How do you keep up with all that? And what do you see as the biggest roadblock that you see at Alinea, and how you combat that?
Well, I think you listed in your question, you listed part of the problem there. The fact that there are so many plans, and the plans have their processors, and the processors have different requirements per discipline, and they dole these out in smaller and smaller amounts. And then you have to go for reauthorization. So you listed one of the problems well, but one of the ways that Alinea has grown and built out what we do is by falling in love with the problem, right? So falling in love with the problems clients bring us and then progressively solving those. So here's the problem that we were faced with when we first moved into this arena. And that was, Carol, we have more and more prior authorizations. We're used to a one-payer system, and now we're having to deal with all this. And while therapists used to be able to handle this, and we don't have front desk staff, all of a sudden, this is taking inordinate time from our clinicians in the field, right? So they're doing a few things. First of all, even if they do it right, it's taking way too much time, and they're dissatisfied with it. Problem number one. Problem number two, we work with the best providers in the world. I love being on site with therapists and watching them in action. They are going to put the patient first. So they're going to charge ahead and deliver services, waiting for, oh, I'll get the prior auth later. I'll catch up. I'll beg for forgiveness. So they're delivering services. And let me tell you what, we tracked those, and there's a lot of those services that are ultimately not reimbursable, even though they could have been if getting the prior auth had been easier. And then another aspect, they do it right. It takes a long time. They wait for that. Yet with that gap, the patient isn't receiving the services that they so direly need in a timely manner, and maybe even going somewhere else for that therapy. So those were the problems that were brought to us. So what we did, again, with our system set up, what does the therapist know? So, well, let me back up a second. We do the benefit verifications. We have all the payers. We build templates for each of the payers and the plans, so we know which have prior authorization and for which discipline and what other restrictions are around that. So we're teeing that information up right from the start. And is that before therapy is delivered, or is it after the evaluation? we have all that there. And with our system, we prompt the therapists to submit that information that needs to be submitted to the prior auth. That goes into a centralized team. So now it's off of the therapist, but with the right information to prevent the downstream denial from that therapist, right? A centralized team submits it, gains the approval, tracks those turnaround times. We're tracking every step of the way so we can see where there's any holdups or issues that need to be addressed, and then records the number of approved visits in Alinea, which we immediately notify the therapy teams. They can get that patient onto caseload. We're tracking the countdown and visits in 3 days or 3 visits, or we even do it by CPT codes and units in advance of that expiration, starting that process again so there's no gap in care. So the right person has the right prompt and the right information to communicate and keep the process going without it being a burden on anybody. And then by tracking all that, you also can handle those denials that might inevitably occur, and you can more proactively handle those denials. You can go after them because Functional Pathways has proven that if you're proactive and advocating for your patient there, you're going to get something. So we're trying to prevent that having to happen, but if it does, we're helping give information to support fighting that denial.
So when you talk about the documentation piece, and that's something that, you know, I love documentation. I love reading documentation. It's my nighttime reading typically. I don't like to document. I will say that. As a therapist, I'd much rather treat than write stuff down. But if you didn't write it, it didn't happen, right? So we know that.
Yep.
But from those evaluations, you were talking about, do you do the eval first and then get the prior authorization, or do you get the prior authorization and then do the eval? So let's talk about both of those scenarios. First, if you have to do the eval first, are you seeing trends across the board, not necessarily just with us, but just across the board in the industry, of lack of supportive documentation of why that service is needed? And if so, what are you seeing that trend being most often?
You know what? I think you might be verging just out of my area of
Okay.
expertise that I don't necessarily want to expertly opine on. So the documentation is in the EMR, right?
Right.
So the part of what we ask therapists for to submit for that prior authorization is the defined information, like Cohere is different than Evercore is different than AIM. So what is that information that they're asking for, and the progressive questions to ensure that all of that is there to the source that knows that information? That's the part we handle. For why some of those would be denied, I'm just not quite sure of that
Fair enough.
that particular answer there. So certainly for the ones that we have that information of exactly what needs to be submitted, I think those are going really streamlined. I'm not sure what the ultimate reason is for the denial on that prior auth.
Well, and I think you said you have kind of a template, or you called it something different, but kind of a cheat sheet really of each payer and what that expectation looks like or what they require. So having that actually is more than half the battle for most of us, because right now, who knows? Because everybody is so different. What one Humana plan or one Blue Cross plan wants is completely different than the other one. And depending on your reviewer, it can be different as well, because they may interpret things differently than than others, as we know.
Right, right.
So yeah, I mean, I think from a document, and we're always talking about that documentation piece and making sure that we're supporting the services that we provide, that we're documenting those skilled services. But I think, not everybody comes out of school knowing that and knowing what that looks like. So having a partner like Functional Pathways that focuses on that hopefully makes that task a little easier. I was just curious if you saw more denials from the prior auth not needing the eval first, or the prior auth that needs the eval first? Is there one that gets paid or gets approved more often than the other?
You know what? That's such an interesting question, and something I'm going to immediately go back and research and see if we have those correlations in our system. I'll report back to you. Again, because I think that's one of the things that technology can and should do, is not just provide efficiency, not just streamline workflows, but take all of these data points, even if we're pulling it from another system, right? Take these data points and provide insights such as that, so you can make actionable decisions and get ahead of the problem. So thank you for stumping me, Karen. And yeah,
It wasn't my
you
aim,
know,
but I think it's good. I love those conversations. I love when people ask me questions that I'm like, hadn't thought about that. Let's go down that avenue. But I think it's important, and whether we're talking about this or whether we're talking about trends in a disease process, whatever that is, knowing that trend so that you can then get ahead of it, and be able to help other clients down the line of, oh, hey, even though this isn't written down, this is the pattern that they've shown us across however many, companies you may be working with, being able to see what that trend is.
Absolutely. And I think working closely with our clients, that close collaboration of taking questions like this and going, hey, we'll powwow within our team and we'll go, hey, what have we seen? And then we'll reach out and then we'll start this conversation, this communication. We'll talk to Abby, we'll talk to NARA. We'll bring more expertise and insights, and then we'll start to formulate solutions based upon what we learn the actual problem is and go after that. But I don't think anybody can do that in isolation, nor should you even try. It's about pulling together all of these experts in the field and perspectives.
Yep, agreed. Well, and you mentioned Avion and NARA, so let's talk a little bit about advocacy.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
near and dear to my heart, and not something that I always did throughout my career because I was so focused on being a therapist or being a DOR, but now in the last probably 10 years or so, really understood what advocacy really means, that it's not just waving a flag or, wearing a button or whatever. It's really about having those conversations. So how have you seen with your participation in Advion and NARA, what has advocacy done for you personally, but then also for Alinea and your client partners that you work with as well, and the importance of that?
I think that is such a great question. And if you had asked me that 2 years ago, my answer would have been very different. I would have said, seriously, do you really think we have a voice? And I know now from experience that not only do we have a voice, and not only is there a way to effectively use that voice, but that it does make a difference. And I learned that through my participation directly with Advion and NARA. And those were the first times that, teeth chattering, I advocated on the Hill, and then found it's just people, right? And not only that, it's super smart staffers. And if you can connect with them on something personal, because God willing, we all have someone in our life that we love that becomes a senior adult, and God willing, we all do ourselves. So this truly impacts everybody. If we can find that point of connection, if we can bring it home, if we can make it real, we leave an impression, regardless of what the specific item is that we're advocating for. And Paige Silber, our VP of Operations, and I, we learned from
that. So congratulations to Paige on her recent promotion. Very exciting.
She's amazing.
Yes.
We went up and advocated on the Hill, and then we were there again. The staffers that we worked with remembered us, picked up on the story, identified it with their grandparent, and it wasn't the starting the conversation all over again. It was taking it then to the next level. So our voices do make a difference, and working, especially in this industry, I think rehab are unsung heroes. I don't think the natural therapist is the one that's out there running around advocating for the power of rehab or advocating for themselves. So at Alinea, we think it's a gosh darn it, it's an amazing privilege to support rehab. So why wouldn't we advocate for rehab as well in Washington? So we're doing doing our part, and we're learning as we go. But there's so many people to learn from, and then to teach.
Right. Yeah, and I'm always amazed too when I talk to therapists in the field. They feel the same way you did 2 years ago of why am I sending this letter to my senator or my representative? They're not going to read it. Oh yeah, they're going to read 10,000 of them when we throw our arms up and say, we're not going to take this anymore, or hey, you need to pay attention to us.
Yeah.
I was amazed the first time I went to the Hill. We were talking about health interoperability, the tech interoperability, and the staffers that we spoke with had no idea that nursing homes were excluded from funding to support that. And I mean, it was kind of like this light bulb goes on of, well, what do you mean nursing homes weren't provided like hospitals and doctors' offices? I'm like, we didn't get any money to be able to participate in this. And we're already taking cut after cut after cut after cut.
Right.
So it's not like we have extra money laying around or stuffed in a mattress somewhere. That's gone, been gone a long time ago. So I think sometimes what I always say to people if they've never been to the Hill is don't assume that they know what your plight is or that they've heard it before, or that they understand it. Not that they won't understand it once you explain it to them, because they're super smart. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
They're not very old, which you can't make that assumption. Definitely ageist, and you want to leave your ageism at the door, right? When you go to the Hill, because oh my gosh, they are brilliant.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how I made it through my 20s based on how they function. So
and they truly care.
Yes. Yes. And if you tell them those personal stories and you talk about, well, my grandfather didn't get a service because they didn't know he had this diagnosis because we didn't have the health interoperability. Yeah, and those light bulbs go on. So advocacy is just send the letters, go to the Hill. Like to your point, they're just people. Right. I mean, I saw Nancy Pelosi in the hallway and you think, gosh, I see her on TV all the time. She's still a human being. Yeah. So, and she's a senior citizen. Yeah. As a lot of them are. But so where do you see, and this will be one that you and I hadn't necessarily prepped for. So hopefully it's not a not know the answer. I think you will because you're super smart. Let's talk about AI.
Oh, okay.
I know, right? And talking about all the conversations around AI and where you see that going, whether it's with Alinea, with healthcare in general, knowing that there's some scrutiny out there about AI, especially around authorizations and pre and post authorizations and denials and those kind of things. We've seen a lot of different lawsuits about that. So where do you fit in all of that, or where do you see that going and Alinea going with that?
I think AI is that sexy new term, and technology companies are like, okay, how do I get AI in our system? How do we squash it in there? And our CTO is super excited about the power of AI and what it can bring. But we always come back to a few questions. Is this good for patient care? So regardless of what providers ask us, regardless of what we're seeing on the horizon, our true north is, does this make a difference in the life of a senior adult and the family system that surrounds us? And if the answer is no, or we're not sure yet, that gets on the cutting room floor, or at least a simmer ticket to consider later, right?
Right.
So that's our true north where everything is concerned, and certainly AI. That being said, there's certainly power to make a system that streamlines workflows and automates workflows for the power of good even better. And that is where we look at where is the smart, logical, intelligent use of AI. And we found those points. And we have reached out to some of our clients who were saying, hey, we have the ability to do this. What do you think about it? Are you interested? Do you want to take it for a ride? because we can be in theory all day long, but we like to get into reality fast, see what it feels like to the field, see if it makes a difference, and go forward. So I think we would be remiss in ignoring the power of AI, but I think we have to be cautious. Like don't fall in love with the technology. We never fall in love with the technology again. Fall in love with the problem. Does AI help? One of the areas that we're using it is, what should technology do? What should interoperability do? Reduce data entry, reduce redundant data entry, get a better starting point for when a resident enters the community, much less when a resident wants to start therapy services. So we are moving upstream of rehab successfully and have great ideas to move even further. But one of the things that we're doing is using AI to allow therapists to just upload a face sheet and have AI read all of that information, have them confirm it, make sure all the right information is there, and then that kicks off the patient registration much faster, more accurately, bringing that patient onto caseload faster. That, I think, is a very positive use of AI. And let me tell you what, it reads doctor handwriting better than we do.
Well, I can't say
So,
much about that because I have horrible handwriting. So
yeah.
I'm in that club. So I'm that person that in the grocery store, I show somebody my list and they're like, oh, I ask them what it says and they say, oh, did your husband write that? No, no, I did. And I can't read my own writing. So I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So,
So
I think we're gonna see it evolve.
yeah, agreed. Some of it's a little scary to me, but others of it is very exciting because obviously being able to have more hands on the patient as opposed to hands on paperwork or sitting on a phone waiting for somebody to answer to get a prior authorization or whatever that might be is,
Yeah.
gosh, music to my ears as a therapist and a caregiver. Because the more time we spend reading through manuals or waiting on the phone, the less time we have hands on the resident. So
Well, absolutely. And to a point we were discussing earlier, can technology provide insight? Can it take a lot of this data? And one of the things that we do on the therapist dashboard is not only streamline their workflows, but give them insight that makes their lives easier right there in front of their face. So they don't have to have a soft chart over there or sticky note over here or go into this system and then go into this. What they need is right there. So can we use AI to gather these disparate sources of information and put that even greater insight in the powers of those who are making that decision? Why shouldn't we do that? And that's very different than using AI to prompt more denials. You know, are we using AI for good? Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
right. Yeah, totally agree. And I love your phrase about falling in love with the problem and not falling in love with the technology. Yeah, I'm going to steal that one, I think.
Okay.
So what would be your healthcare interoperability, say that 12 times fast, utopia? Like the
Utopia.
perfect, yes.
That's a big word. um, oh gosh. You know what? I'm going to stay out of the technical details for
Okay.
those concerned. And so, if we're really talking about utopia, it would be, and it's one of our core principles too, may we all play well with one another.
Yes.
Like you were just mentioning, all these different systems that Functional Pathways was using. Is there not a way for these different systems to play well with each other in a non-territorial way, but in a way that elevates the strengths of each? And I'll use an example, smaller entrepreneurial companies are built different than larger corporate companies. There are things that a smaller entrepreneurial company can do and do faster
Right.
that an established company can't. There are certainly things that a larger company can do. So, is there a way to take advantage of both? keep the integration, the interoperability in the background and create a seamless experience and seamless options for those that we mutually serve. Yes. Why does that have to be so hard?
I ask that question all the time. Why does this not lead to this? It's like algebra for me because I'm not good
Yeah.
at algebra because I don't understand how you add letters. I get numbers, but I don't
Oh,
understand the letters that go in there. So, because that's just not how my brain works. So I think, yeah, why? To me, and to most people, I think that work in healthcare, it's like, really, why does it have to be that hard? It shouldn't be that hard.
right.
And,
And I think part
we
of it is those
question CMS, and that's why advocacy comes in of, hey, can we do something that makes sense? I think
yeah.
Leanne and I joked on the last Pathways to Success about just give me 3 days in a room,
Oh, yeah.
just a few of us, people that have been here for a while, and we can fix it all. We can fix it
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
given free reign.
I'll deliver the pizza. I'll keep the door locked, stay
Oh,
in
you're
there.
invited for sure. You're invited into the inner sanctum on that one, definitely.
Oh, thank you.
So just as kind of a final thought and question, what do you and companies like yours need from our industry in order to continue to expand, grow, improve, enhance all those things that we talked about around productivity, efficiency, and most importantly, that patient-centered care? What do you need either continued or in addition to what we're already giving to make sure that that growth and expansion and improvement happens?
That's a great question. And I love the fact that you even pose that question because you're asking, how can we help? Essentially, is what you're saying. And so thank you for that. And I think that is a huge leap forward in collaboratively solving these problems. So I think the strength of what we have the privilege of our clients trust us to not only allow us to solve the initial problems that we come to the table to solve, but then they're like, hey, here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Can we progressively build on that? So, some of the areas that I'm keen to continue solving is again, supporting those workflows upstream of therapy so that it's not so hard to bring a patient onto caseload, to give them the services that they need to provide that access to care. So engaging residents once they move into a community. Um, Engaging residents in the health fairs, in wellness events and wellness program, et cetera. So we already have the tools and the power to do that. And we do that on a very configurable basis because all our clients do that somewhat separately. So I think coming together to engage all residents in a community. The other one is to move even further upstream to support how we can serve senior communities themselves. So changing some of the standards of what is on their intake forms, like collecting email addresses for one, maybe even using Alinea to digitize some of their intake and then bridging that connection. So if we're helping the senior community, we're helping rehab, just think of the power that could be delivered, not only to the efficiencies, but to the communication as appropriate in that industry. And then my personal favorite that is near and dear to my heart because of what I experienced after my mom had a massive stroke. After she had a stroke, I dropped everything. I was by her side for 6 weeks over 5 different care settings, starting at ground zero each time with a new healthcare team, progressive lack of sleep, progressive stress, yet you're having to make life and death decisions about what do I do next? What's available? What are my options? What do I choose? And you know who I trusted the whole way across the continuum? The ones I connected with, the ones that saw my mother as a whole individual, the ones that helped me care for her because I eventually brought her home, was rehab. So can we streamline the connection from rehab to rehab to rehab across the continuum of care because it's easy to develop trust with rehab. So can they advise, or can you stay within the same organization as you go across this continuum of care? Families, seniors are not going to fall into, I don't even want to call them gaps, they're chasms
Yes.
in that continuum of care between settings. So I don't have all the answers yet, but I don't set that down. And I believe that together we can solve that problem as senior adults move from acute care settings into skilled settings, back to wherever they call home, cycle through that again. It doesn't have to be so hard or traumatic for them. So that's where you can help. Let's keep that door locked in that proverbial room you said and talk about that a little bit more.
Well, I think your story is not an isolated one, and I appreciate you sharing that. I had a similar experience with my dad, and I look at, my gosh, what if I had not been in healthcare? What about all of these? I look at my mom, and what if she hadn't had me with a healthcare background? How would that have gone? Would she have known what questions to ask? Would other family members in your family have what questions to ask? Or if you didn't, at least know where to go to get them, kind of thing. So I appreciate that perspective. And I think a lot of us in this industry have that same thought process, but we don't necessarily know where to turn to get the answers. And I think Alinea certainly provides a lot of those answers from that, especially the prior authorization, the efficiency and productivity that you talked about, but just as another partner that gets it, and you're right there with them, where they're not walking that path alone, because it can be very lonely and overwhelming to some people. So thank you for that, for sure.
You bet.
Final thoughts, anything you want the listeners to hear in addition to what we've talked about?
There would be one thing, and you've alluded to it in the past, is that people think of Alinea as streamlining and automating workflows, helping with revenue cycle processes, prior authorizations, benefit verifications, all of that. And we do all that really, really well. But you know what? I'm going to keep it near and dear to my heart too. What we also do, and I spoke of this before, is truly engage that patient, their authorized family members, and their responsible parties in a way that is doing a few things. It's building that trust and that relationship while it is not only not increasing the workload on therapists, but actually decreasing that workload. So yes, we do that starting from the beginning with the digitized intake and the consents, whether you're on site or live across the country. But we also have HIPAA compliant direct messaging. We also have Family Link. If you think a connection that shares how your loved one is doing is super meaningful, imagine the power of a picture or a video to put the family at ease, help them recognize the power of therapy and what is happening. And our clients that use it well, especially that combination of the HIPAA compliant direct messaging and Family Link, they find that it is saving their therapists hours of time that they would have otherwise spent on the phone, fielding messages, dealing with angst. And then when you have that trusting relationship, you're preventing a host of downstream potential problems before they even occur, because it's not building up that frustration and what's happening in distrust. And then the families themselves, those that trust, that see that power, they actually become a source of self-referral for future episodes of care when they're needed, not when an acute episode occurs, an acute event occurs, but also, hey, what else do you provide? Do you have wellness services? We want our loved ones to continue working with you. So their relationship, it's so powerful. So we will continue to help our clients understand how they can use that relationship better for their benefit, for the family's benefit, for the patient's benefit, and the senior community served love it.
It all comes down to communication, right? No matter how that goes, it all comes down to communication. And I think we saw that a lot through the pandemic when communication was halted in the way that we knew it and
Yeah.
the way we were accustomed to, especially in senior living communities and especially nursing homes, because they were really kind of cut off from the world. So I think we learned how impactful communication really is, and getting that communication does really put us at ease most of the time. I mean, obviously there are some that can be stress causing, but overall, if you can have that back and forth and that direct contact, either with the resident or the therapist or whoever that might be, gosh, what a huge difference it makes in everybody's world.
It does. Relationships are everything.
Yes, very true.
Yeah.
Well, Carol, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure to talk with you. If you guys, our listeners, have questions about Alinea, it's alineawellness.com, correct? And
Yes.
Carol Vance has been our guest today, and super excited to have you on and just talk about all things, technology and prior authorization and everything that we talked about. Just always a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Karen. It was my pleasure.